Hi, I'm Ashley Osborne, PropTech pioneer and CEO and co-founder of Devour PropTech, the digital platform that levels the playing field for smart property investors. Today I want to talk to you about something that we get asked all the time, which is, why should I buy new build instead of second-hand property? The reality is there's reasons to buy both. And what I wanted to do today was tell you the top 5 reasons we think you should buy new build, and perhaps the 5 times where we think it makes more sense to buy second-hand property. The first reason we think it makes a lot more sense to buy new build is because of maintenance and running costs. Now, it's one of those things that not many people take into account when they're buying property, but actually the cost of actually maintaining property can be really significant. For an older property, it might cost as much as 5% each year of the rental income that you're generating just to maintain the property. So for new builds specifically, they typically come with a developer's warranty that covers all of the things like the white goods and all of the parts of the building that you've purchased, and generally it costs a lot less money for a lot longer to actually run and maintain the property. So that's really the main reason that most people would buy new build over second-hand. And it's even more important if you're a long way away from the property, because it costs a lot of money to call out an engineer to just make minor changes to the property. Second is legal compliance. Now, it might not be something that's immediately obvious, but one of the things that happens with new build property is that a lot of lawyers spend a lot of time making sure that things like the title to the property is correct, that there's no outstanding legal issues such as encumbrances, etc. on the property. So it makes it much more straightforward for you to actually deal with the interest in the property and deal with it in the future when you sell it, etc., than with the second-hand property. There's a lot more issues, particularly in places like the UK, where you've got leasehold interests which expire after periods of time. It makes it far more difficult to mortgage a property, etc. So it's that legal compliance as well that does make a big difference with new build property. The third reason that we think it makes a lot of sense to buy new build is the lettability. You tend to find that tenants are prepared to pay more rent for a new build property, but also the property will let much quicker. So it won't be on the market looking for a new tenant for anywhere near as long. So it does make a lot more sense from a financial perspective when you're looking for that tenant to actually have a new build. Because tenants know that it's not necessarily just the property itself, it's the maintenance and those issues that they just don't want to deal with. The fourth reason is building efficiency and environmental compliance. And those two things might not sound that important at the moment, but we really think they'll be very important in the future. As the environment becomes much more of a focal point for buildings and building ownership in the UK, but also all over the world, this is going to be a hot topic. We've already seen it with the commercial building space, with things like Green Star buildings and LEED buildings. We think in the future, it's going to be a big deal for tenants to make sure that the buildings that they go to are environmentally efficient and energy efficient. So not only are they not polluting, but they're cheap to maintain and run, but also from an environmental efficiency perspective, you don't want to have to spend a lot of money retrofitting your building to make sure that it's compliant. And the final reason is tax efficiency. Now, it's not as important in places like New Zealand and the United Kingdom, where you can't depreciate your building, but in places like Australia and other countries around the world, being able to depreciate your building, it creates a huge tax advantage for you. And what's happening is, as governments want investors to spend most of their money on new build property, they're making it a lot more difficult for investors to be able to depreciate buildings if they're not new at the time that they bought them. So that saving can be significant, and it's only really available now for new build property. We also think it makes sense to buy second hand if the new build premium is very, very high. So for example, if the market's been moving for a significant amount of time and there's a real premium that people are paying just to get new build, it probably means that it's at the top end of the cycle and owner occupiers are paying a lot more money for property. And in those situations, it makes a lot more sense to buy second-hand property. The other thing that might happen is you might come across properties in the second-hand market where there's just the opportunity for you to add significant value to the property by developing, refurbishing, etc. And you're going to create a significant amount of value by simply doing that. However, I've been through that refurbishment development process many times myself. It tends to be a lot more expensive than you think it will be, and it might not necessarily deliver the same value as what you think. So you have to be very careful if you go down that route. But it is an opportunity that's worth thinking about. Another thing you might want to think about as well, if you're trying to add value to a property and you're actually in another country. So if you're overseas trying to add value to a property in Australia or the UK, it is something that requires a lot of time to actually manage that process. So you might find that even though value can be created, it might take up so much of your time and it might be so difficult to do remotely that it probably isn't worth it. One of the reasons you might think about secondhand as well is it tends to be a little bit cheaper. So new build does have a premium attached to it. So if your budget's very tight and you just want to get on the market, you might find it is cheaper to get into that secondary market, and there's potentially more choice available. The only thing that you need to remember with that process though is that it can create a false economy, because sometimes you might find while you're saving money when you buy the property, your maintenance costs so far outweigh what you save that it might not be worth it. Remember, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with second-hand property, and the cost of retrofitting and rectifying those things can be very expensive. And the final reason that some people like buying second-hand property is because there's a lot less unknown information. Obviously, the property already exists. There's information on what it could potentially rent for, because you can actually get an agent to come and see it at that point in time. You know perhaps what you're getting as well. So there's no development or construction risk. So the thing is with that second-hand property though, is that you don't get the same growth profile from your investment, because you're simply getting a return in line with what the market is delivering. Whereas when you buy new build, you're taking risk and you're buying many years of plan in advance of that property actually being developed, and you're actually getting a reward in addition to market risk and market return for taking that risk and putting money into a development before it's even taken off the ground. I hope you found that video useful today. If you did, please like, subscribe, follow, or leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.